I think it's fair to say that many of us in this room are in maybe not the same boat, but a similar boat, right, when it comes to this transformation journey. So how do you kind of see this, the architectural changes, right, when it comes to, let's say, the data models, the development pipelines, the existing cloud architectures, right? Do you see this as a gradual shift within your product pipelines? Or are you seeing some radical changes which are driving the adoption of AI into these architectural models?
Sure. Thanks, Venkat. Well, so in my view, I think the enterprise architecture, of course, has to transform to be AI ready, but it starts one step back, right? The organization needs to first start treating AI as not just a standalone enabler, but something which is really integral to the business strategy itself, right? From an enterprise architecture perspective, I think there are 4 pillars which need to evolve as we go along and get ready for the AI transformation, which is around business, data, applications, and infrastructure. Now, let me talk about all 4 of these as to what I mean by that, right? So when I say for the enterprise architecture, the business pillar needs to evolve or transform, what I mean by that is there has to be an embedded AI first mindset while we are formulating the business strategy, while we are thinking about what we want to do tomorrow. I think there has to be an AI first mindset in business. That's the first and the most important point there. The second bit that I think is enterprise architects have to start playing a wider role as far as value mapping is concerned. You know, because there's a lot of buzz around AI, generative AI, but if we are not able to map it to an actual business value delivery, I think it loses the steam, right? The second bit that I spoke of is data. Anything and everything, all the kind of LLM models that you want to run, the kind of automations that you want to build, there has to be a very solid data governance in place. It is non-negotiable, right? So master data management and governance and the overall data governance itself plays a really important role there. Now talking about maybe applications, which is the third pillar of enterprise architecture, which needs to transform for AI readiness. The overall application should be API and microservices based. That is extremely important for us to be able to pick and choose the services that AI generates for us and invoke them in the various flows that we want to build together. The last aspect that I spoke of, which is another pillar from the enterprise architecture perspective, is the technology, and therefore technology being cloud native with very strong CI/CD pipelines, DevSecOps being fully enabled. All of these are building blocks that are needed for you to be able to thrive on the AI journey.
Thanks, Shashwat, for that. I think you've summed it up beautifully, the 4 pillars, right? And I'm going to make a segue from that into one thing that stood out prominently, which is the value mapping part of it, right? And I'm going to flit across to Vishwesh, right? Because you also have a strong product portfolio, right? It also kind of reverberates with what I saw on the graph out here, right? The ROI, right? So absolutely, there has been a lot of talk last year, right? For instance, about productivity, the assimilation of AI for efficiency and so on and so forth, right? And it's this year that we are beginning to have larger conversations around how this is translating into revenue, right? Margin gains and so on and so forth, right? So any thoughts around where we are exactly in this hype cycle from a product perspective? How do you kind of see this panning out? And if there are some stellar cases, right, narrations that you have, which helps put this in perspective, we are all ears.
From my vantage point, and I've been AI for like at least different versions of AI, from the voice AI in my Amazon Alexa days to the platform, generative AI, and now in the agentic use cases. So AI, when I say about AI, there are 3 distinct buckets. Of course, everything influences each other. Number 1 is the traditional AI, which I would say 10 years, 15 years back, we would have recommendations engines, we had search, what we call as deep learning, all that fits into that bucket very well. The second is the generative aspect of AI. And that wave, as we very well know, started with the ChatGPT, and now we are in the 5th version, or 5th, I would say, ChatGPT version. which helps generate text, then came voice, and now video. So that's the second bucket. And the third bucket is the agentic AI, which is now live and really ramping up in various use cases and organizations. So that's the first mental model I want everyone to hold. And the second, very important, is how have organizations adopted these three waves across these three different buckets of AI? So the traditional AI, I believe, used in regressional analysis and various other aspects, it's there across organization. Everyone uses it for various point solutions and point use cases. So it's there everywhere. The second one, I think, was the hype cycle, going to the question, last year and year before that, where folks were trying to, again, the number one use case, at least in the domains I was summarizing text or generating basic voice for the BPO use cases or the help use cases. And obviously now, with the latest thing on my mind is the nano banana. I don't know how many have heard about it, but generating video, which is super real and very specific. So the hype cycle for the first wave, I think it's mature in terms of traditional. For the second one, it is, I think, mature from a generative AI perspective in all the segments of an organization. And to define an organization, it can be in a SMB state, mid-market, or enterprises. All three have adopted generative AI quite well today. And that's all about productivity, what was there last year. And finally, to really focus on where the hype curve is today in AI, it's agentic use cases. Today, many organizations have defined it quite well. Hey, I want to use to optimize the workflow or optimize my use case using agents. But the question, and that's exactly what the survey says, is folks have not defined the metrics associated with it.
So development, right? Development, scaling, right? Like Shashwat and Vishwesh mentioned. These, when combined with, let's say, responsibility and accountability, these are competing guardrails, right? So I'm going to ask you to wear the cop's hat, right? And throw some light on, for example, within Persistent, right? How are we kind of drilling some of these principles into the architectures, right, that we are using when we are building AI, right? How are we doing it? How do we ensure persistence, if I may use that word, right, into some of these architectures, right? Things like transparency, accountability, bias, fairness. And I come from a very strong cyber background, right? And those things are spilling into this domain as well, right? So how do we kind of ensure that they exist meaningfully together?
Just think about a situation, and you must be seeing that very, very regularly. Whenever you consume any model, a fine print comes down below AI generated, kind of take your own, consume it at your own risk types. That fine print doesn't work in many industries. Can a financial industry or a bank send you a statement saying AI generated, so the accuracy of this may be at your own discretion? No, it is not, right? So it has to be very, very accurate. How you ensure it is accurate? And that is where the ethical practice starts coming in. Starting from your basic data that you are using in the backend to your cores, the development, the application, the tools, whatever you are using it, what is that you are using it? Are you kind of aligned to the basic, I can say, the ethical boundary lines? And I'll give you a few examples, and that will possibly make the life much easier. In today's time, let's say we are consuming a model inside an enterprise for any business, anything that you're doing a particular team. Let's say the sales team. Sales team is definitely kind of will have a front end. There are enough and more data in the back end that we've spoken about. So I put a command saying, give me the revenue projection for the current month, right? When the data comes in, it has to give me the information which is relevant to me, number one. Number two, depending on what level of access I am supposed to get it. A CEO asking that question will have a different level of data. A CFO asking that question will have a different level of data. A chief revenue officer asking that question will have a different level of data. And a sales representative on the field asking that question will have a different level of data. How you are stitching it in the back end. And that is where all your control, your guardrails, everything comes in. And that is when you start stitching your ecosystem of different information, different databases, different systems, whatever you have, how you are defining each and every single line, that matters, right? And it is in today's time, majority of the organization, possibly what I speak in different forums, like come to know that, well, we are doing it because my CXO told me, my boss told me, hence we have to do something, hence we are doing it. Do it when you have the entire guardrails are defined. Otherwise, you will create a system which will definitely going to give you a lot of insight, but that insight may not be the right intelligence to take decisions. And that is extremely critical. So focus on your guardrails, focused on your data source part of it, and which one is the right source of data. Focus on that.
Within the architectures that we are building, right, is there also a lot of these dimensions baked in, let's say, when we are dealing with the B2B kind of mode, or let's say when we are dealing with critical infrastructure? I know, Rejin, for example, you're dealing a lot with critical infrastructure. You probably have a lot more insights into what the bot is thinking, right, in your dark factories and so on and so forth. So does the maturity vary across these industries?
One of the aspects in manufacturing is that traditionally, the challenge with manufacturing has been that most of your machines are still older, and anybody who works in the manufacturing organization would know that you've got equipments which are 30 plus years old, and how do you correlate that with in an era of AI where you want data, and data is one of the fundamental building blocks if you have to build AI use case, and even like any organization, even our organization has got machines where taking out the data itself becomes a significant challenge. How do you live with that reality versus when you're establishing a new age factory where data is readily available? So you have to cater to both the needs. So that's where large part of the design looks at the fact on saying that, and you also look at a hybrid approach where you're looking at operators trained in operating both the modes, where in some place where you're working more in offline mode where you have to train models, give the operator and train in such a way that he's able to pick up data. Simple use case like predictive maintenance. You are looking at a case where you're taking out data, the person goes back to his desktop, feed in that data, run models. Whereas newer machine lines, you have almost stepping into a dark factory kind of thing where you've got the entire, we have not still gone into the agentic mode because we still feel that leaving machines to be run by agents probably is a bit futuristic and Star Wars kind of scenario. So you got both scenarios where new age factories are able to operate with more real-time alerts. Operators are able to give visual signs to do that. There is a classic MIT research which has come in over the last weekend or prior to that, where 95% of the AI use cases fail. And then when on one hand, when we speak of future AI-driven organizations, what's the reality? If 95% use cases are failing, which are those organizations which are actually driving or going to be the AI-driven use case organization? So that's where, and if I look at marketing as a function, we are actually looking at the KPI, which is A&P spends, which is a very direct KPI. So how do you define and redefine the KPIs of a marketer saying that, okay, you have been working with X amount of budget, you usually take 6 weeks to get a creative out. What can now the new KPI going to be? Can we cut the marketing spend by 50%? Can we look at, say, instead of 6 weeks, can we have the creative out in 2 weeks? So that becomes the KPI in terms of how do you look at from an advertising and promotion function.
When we're talking about architectures, right? Like for example, when we had the cloud, right? There were changes in the operating model, right? Infrastructure became code, for instance, right? The real question was, what does this mean for the people, right? Who owns the code, right? What changes happen within the operating model within the organizations, right? Now with AI coming in, right? Like we all agree, right? It's more of a people problem, as much of a people thing as it is the tech one. So what changes when these architectures change?
So from a people perspective, what we did is we enabled AI for everyone, right? And after some time, we found out people are not really very clear how to use it, right? So then we created some examples, this is how you use it in sales. This is how you use it in marketing. This is how you use it in recruitment, right? Then we saw, and we also opened up a forum, a global forum, where any employee can come in and share how they have actually leveraged AI. So slowly what we did, the first message that we sent to our employees is AI is here to augment you, not to replace you. That's the message very clearly we shared, right? So once that was there, we really found some superstars. You won't believe the kind of applications they used AI. So there was this guy in Japan. He actually took the org structure of a customer for whom he was doing exec search. He actually put it in AI. He did a detailed research on their org structure. And then he went to the customer and he proposed, the way you are organized itself is not very efficient. You should reorg in this way. And this creates these 3-4 openings. And we as Randstad, as a staffing firm, will help you to find those 3-4 openings, right? So this was a very fantastic use case, like where, it went beyond, what normally we think AI is used for. What really helps our consultants day in, day out is how to write a perfect job description, right? And how do you eliminate biases in a job description? See, sometimes we receive a job description from a customer. If you read it, you will understand that it only wants a male of this particular age and this particular orientation and things like that. So the first one we did, it actually removes all these biases, helps you to compose a job description, which is way more inclusive, right? So the adoption starts, right? And then it moves on. Now coming to the problem selection, we knew that, the back-end processes are where you will get maximum returns, right? And here again, I was very surprised when I read the MIT study. It almost was a playbook of what we have done, right? So we had a combination of 3 things, right? Certain use cases we went with the internal development. Certain use cases we leveraged the OEM. And for certain use cases, we brought in a specialty product vendor.
Anyone from the audience has any questions? I mean, we have an eclectic mix of CIOs and product owners out here.
This question is for Shashwat. We keep hearing about platform strategy and AI adoption strategy. So you, from the consumer standpoint, how do you drive that? What's the thought process in, a platform strategy within your organization?
So the way I look at it is the platform kind of evolves as you go along. The tech landscape kind of evolves, and therefore you need to, when you're looking at bringing in generative AI enabled use cases, you need to flex it. And again, I'd go back to the fundamentals of the enterprise architecture that I spoke of. If those 4 or 5 building blocks are aligned, irrespective of whether you've had all the big building blocks in your tech landscape or you've legacy applications that have been built grounds up, it would still be very easy to plug in generative AI use cases or AI use cases. That's how I look at it.